All right. We appreciate Jake Manning, Mississippi Smart Homes, mssmarthomes.com, mssmarthomes.com for your next Sonos system, surround sound in the house, movies, music, any sporting event. And they can also hook you up with the Starlink, walk you through that, know how to install it, Starlink packages, and also they have their security package powered by mssmarthomes.com. The Out of Bounds Show is brought to you by Aplos, Simply Mediterranean, 2 spots here in the Jackson metro area. Fantastic food, atmosphere, and they both have places where you can sit outside and enjoy the sunshine at Aplos in Jackson and Aplos in the Renaissance. Pita Maz, Lebanese rolls, Greek wings, Euro pizzas. I'm in. I'm hungry. Aplos in the Renaissance and Aplos in Jackson for lunch today. We are ESPN 1059 The Zone. We're streaming live on thezone1059.com and the Out of Bounds radio app. And we want to welcome in, I guess, our new friend of the show, Eli Hershkovich. And he is with The Lines US and big college basketball insider, among other things, sports betting. He joins us on the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line. Eli, good morning. How are you?
What's going on, Bo? A great weekend of college basketball action ahead with the Final Four, except we're going to be hearing about Dan Hurley and Plaingate for the next, 48, 72 hours.
Dude, we talked about it this morning. And can you know how coaches are so schedule driven and militaristic. Can you imagine the state of mind Danny Hurley, UConn head basketball coach, was as their plane was delayed time after time?
I can't. We heard all the rants over the last few weeks about how he thinks UConn got screwed with their seeding and their placement in the bracket. I think we all could say that's a bunch of hoopla, but now he maybe has a legitimate case just because it's not like UConn was the one that scheduled its flight and airplane. I think that was all by the NCAA. I'm pretty sure that's who handles all that on a program-by-program basis. So pretty wild story just in the sense that it's UConn of all teams that got the worst end of the stick. But I think we all know that it boils down to what the matchup and what's going to take place on the court on Saturday. I mean, these are college kids that have had late nights.
Well, all right, what is I guess the best story is North Carolina State. Is that where you're going? Tell me what you're thinking here.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about a team that was 1,000-1 to win the national championship ahead of the ACC tournament. You win 5 games in 5 days. First game of the tournament, no DJ Horn, their leading scorer, and was coming off the bench just because he was dealing with an injury at the beginning of the tournament and played through it, missing that first game against the Cardinals, and they were down. Think about that. You guys have, Bo, you know that Mississippi State had its ups and downs this season, but as you well know, nothing compares to what Louisville basketball has, and Louisville fans for that matter, have dealt with over the last couple of years under Kenny Payne. Hopefully things are different with Pat Kelsey now in town, getting a few transfers, big additions, but I digress. NC State was trailing at halftime to Louisville. 9 wins later, or I guess 8.5 halves of basketball later, they're double that. They're in the Final Four. It's remarkable. They've gotten some shooting luck. If you go back to the Marquette win in the Sweet 16, something I harp on, or at least highlight a lot when I'm handicapping, is potential regression spots, and Marquette shooting 4 of 31 from behind the arc against the Wolfpack. That theoretically isn't sustainable. Then again, you go back to their matchup in the Elite Eight, and Duke got some luck, to say the least, with Houston, their leading scorer, their point guard, and one of the best players in the country, Jamal Shedd, going down in their Sweet 16 matchup. So NC State, none of us expected this. They've definitely gotten the benefit of the doubt when it comes to opponents having arguably their worst game of the season. I'm looking at you, Marquette, but DJ Burns, DJ Horn, Kevin Keats, it's a great story.
It is a great story. Alabama's a good story too. And their first Final Four, hell, Purdue's first Final Four since 1980, and they're a basketball school, which is really hard to, well, I think it tells you how, and as you know, the tournament has been expanded since then. But it means it's hard to get there. I don't think we understand how difficult it is to get to the second weekend, how many times the Blue Bloods missed the second weekend, but just the other teams. But to get to the third weekend is virtually impossible. So we're visiting with Eli Hershkovich, The Lines US, all into sports betting, college hoops. He joins us on the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line. This is ESPN 105.9 The Zone. Do you give Alabama a shot? I mean, the line's 11.5. Do you give Alabama a shot against UConn, Eli?
So I published my write-up this morning, big breakdown, one of my biggest of the season on a game-by-game basis, and a really good, intriguing matchup. I do give Alabama a fighter's chance. When you think about a high-variance team and a double-digit spread, Alabama, top 20 three-point attempt rate in college basketball, Mississippi State basketball fans know that very well. I know the Bulldogs had some success against Alabama this season to an extent, maybe over stretches, but this is still one of the best offensive teams in the country, and Mark Sears averaging over 24 points a game in the tournament. So when I was doing my handicapping for this game, I make the line around UConn minus 10.5. And now that we're at this juncture of the season, spreads, totals, these major betting markets are so efficient. Not that they aren't earlier in the tournament, but typically the handle at this point, just because it's such a big handle, it's not comparable to, let's say, a Super Bowl betting handle, but still, it's the Final Four. A lot of money and bets are going into this. I think it's safe to say the market for Alabama-UConn, this matchup, is fairly efficient. So I'm not betting the spread or the total, even though I think Alabama can keep this thing within single digits for a chunk of the game, despite the jet lag potentially for UConn. And I say that in jest, depending on how your listeners want to think about playing gate for the Huskies. I went Mark Sears under 20.5 points. And Stephon Castle, pro prospect lottery pick in the upcoming NBA draft, has shut down the opponent's best guard, 6'6" wing, and Mark Sears 6'1". So just height advantage wise, if you want to look at it purely from that standpoint. And I know you might be saying, well, Sears is averaging 24 points in the tournament, and his scoring prop is 20.5 or 19.5. So are you really good at getting a good number? Is that a good edge? Well, he averages 21 points per game on the season. So just think about that with the way the market is shaping this number.
Okay.
And Castle defending Sears, like we saw against Illinois in the Elite Eight, Terrence Shannon, single digits, 8 points. Boo Buie, right around single digits, if not a similar number to Terrence Shannon. So no matter whether Alabama hangs around in this game, and I know maybe the general notion is Sears has to go off for Alabama to keep this thing within a few possessions, but Alabama has the shooting if they generate enough high-tempo, up-tempo possessions. But either way, I think Sears is held in check to an extent.
Okay.
I make the number right around 18 points.
Okay, so you're going under. Sears had a phenomenal game against Clemson. He's been real. I mean, we've talked about Sears and Estrada here all year, among other players for Alabama and what they've been able to do on the perimeter. And as Eli Hershkovich knows, all Nate Oates wants to do is shoot threes or shoot within 3 or 4 feet of the basket. And that's where we're going in the NBA. And that is being adopted around college basketball left and right because of the analytics. Man, the for the most part, the mid-range game is gone, isn't it, Eli?
I'm really glad you brought that up. And when you go back to Alabama's Elite Eight win over Clemson, they played more like your 90s, maybe even last decade college basketball team. I mean, you go back to Kemba leading UConn to the title. It's not like Kemba couldn't shoot from behind the arc, but a lot of those key shots, a lot of those highlights that we watch over and over again and see over and over again are Kemba pulling up from the elbow from the free throw line. And you don't see that from guards in this era of college basketball just because, like you said, predominantly you want to take the most efficient shot. And analytically speaking, that's from behind the arc and around the rim. I will say the one caveat to that in this matchup in particular, and I'm really curious to see how Nate Oates, the Alabama coach, plays this, is UConn's defensive scheme. Dan Hurley, the Huskies want to run you off the three-point line, and they play drop coverage with Donovan Clingan when their 7'2" mammoth is on the floor, and he's playing like a mammoth. That's not even a hyperbole at this point. They want to force you to take mid-range jump shots. I trust Nate Oates a lot more than I did Brad Underwood. You know, when we talked Big Ten and Midwest college basketball or teams from my area of the country, going back to a few weeks ago when I joined you, Bo, we were talking about, okay, what do we think of this conference or the Michigan States of the world, Tom Izzo? I'm not super high on Brad Underwood, and he kind of proved that to me yet again last week against UConn, challenging Clingan and then doubling down in game when it wasn't working. I don't expect that from Oates. I think he's truly, not to use the cliche, he's going to take what the defense has given him. But if the mid-range shot is there for Sears or Aaron Estrada, Nate Oates is going to tell his players to take it, because you go back to when St. John's covered twice against UConn this season. Granted, they had a really efficient mid-range shooter in Denise Jenkins, but Rick Pitino, Hall of Fame coach, didn't shy away from the mid-range. So I would expect Alabama to lean on that shot a little bit more than they have this season, and ever under Nate Oates for that matter. And hopefully it allows them to keep this game close, just because I expect Purdue, NC State to be more so of the blowout variety.
Okay, so you got a blowout over on the other side. Well, the early game. Here it's 5:09 tip. The late game is 7:49 Central Time. I hope both are close. I really hope Bama UConn is close, and that Bama, plays well and challenges the Huskies. So nobody, Eli, no, I don't know of any team that's gone back-to-back since the Florida Gators and Billy the Kid, Billy Donovan. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah, going back to almost 2 decades ago.
Mm-hmm.
And what's even more wild is you look at UConn's success from a betting standpoint, covering 10 straight games in the tournament. So that dates back to the winning the national title last year, covering all 6 games and winning all 4 and covering all 4 this season, obviously, or this March. You go back to 2018 Villanova, 2016 Villanova, both teams won the championship, 2015 Duke, 2014 UConn, 09 UNC with Ty Lawson. The first leg of that Florida back-to-back championship in 06, 91 Duke, and 1985 Villanova, the only teams in March Madness history to cover every single game of their 6 NCAA tournament wins en route to winning the national championship. So it's not only impressive in their attempt to go back-to-back and the motivation that Dan Hurley provides this team, and they certainly have even more of it after the Planegate situation last night, early this morning, but it's even more impressive with UConn when you go back to losing Adama Sanogo from last year. You lose Andre Jackson, and you lose Jordan Hawkins. I had Chris Spatola on my podcast earlier in the week, who's an ESPN college basketball analyst, was on the Duke coaching staff when they won the title going back to 2010. I was a huge Adama Sanogo stan the last couple of years, even when UConn got ousted in the first round, losing to New Mexico State a few tournaments ago. That was when everybody was criticizing Dan Hurley for his inability to win in the Big Dance, believe it or not. Now UConn has won 10 straight March Madness games. Donovan Klingen's growth, even in the last month, Spatola and I were going back and forth about this, is truly remarkable. Not only his rim presence, but he wasn't necessarily healthy going back to non-conference play. Dominating Illinois, 22 points, I think nearly double-digit blocks yet again, and a double-double for the Huskies big man. So if we do get the Purdue-UConn matchup, and UConn, let's say they cover, even if they don't, if they're going for 12 straight NCAA tournament wins spanning over the last couple years, and we get that Klingen-Zach Edey matchup, that's what everybody wants to see and should want to see. I know, Bo, you and I both want to maybe watch Alabama keep this one competitive on Saturday, and hopefully they do, just because I don't have the same level of hope for NC State against Purdue. I'm just rooting for the hypothetical and the likely matchup between Edey and Klingen on Monday night.
All right, so Hurley's trying to do something that hasn't been done since Billy D in Florida. And Florida didn't even really care about it just because they're a football school. This would be – and, man, they're all in, as we all know, up in stores, both men's and women's. Okay, Eli Hershkovich on the Out of Bounds show and the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line. The Lines US plus his podcast, College Basketball Insider. I mentioned the kind of, feel-good stories, NC State, and then DJ Burns. Man, watching him play, people love him because he's overweight, and we all had that buddy who – I said this earlier in the week, Eli. We all had that buddy who was a little pudgy, a little fluffy, a little overweight growing up. But the dude could ball at whatever sport, and not all of them, but whatever sport you were playing. And that's DJ Burns. He started at Tennessee, then went to Winthrop, and then and now he's at NC State. What a great story. Are you looking at any bets on him this weekend, Eli?
So my issue with Burns, and he got the best of Kyle Filipowski, Duke center, and it's kind of your prototypical Duke player. Super talented, uber talented, and then underperforms and then some on the biggest stage for Duke in a game that they're favored by 3 possessions against a Tobacco Road rival in NC State. And the Wolfpack continue their run, like I mentioned, unprecedented, 1,000-1 before the tournament. NC State was priced at that number to win the national championship, 200-1 before March Madness began. Burns' points prop, I think, is right around 14.5. It's actually 15.5. If you think NC State keeps this game competitive, Burns probably goes over that number. My issue here is I don't know if he's necessarily going to be matched up with Zach Edey at either end of the floor. Maybe offensively, Edey guards him for stretches, but Purdue plays drop coverage similar to UConn with Edey and Klingen, not two of the most agile bigs. Klingen's super athletic. Edey maybe a little bit more slower footed than Klingen, but still both are over 7 feet tall. My issue with Burns in this matchup is defensively. As good as he is offensively, Purdue runs pick and roll at a top 65 frequency, and NC State's best ball screen defenders are Mohamed Diarra and Ben Middlebrooks off the bench. Now, I'm not saying Kevin Keats is going to pull Burns off the floor, but I could see Burns picking up a quick 2 fouls in this game, or maybe 10 minutes gone by in the first half. Maybe he's inefficient from the floor, and Keats is saying, okay, we're going to rely on our guards to win us this game, and kind of rightfully so, because Purdue's drop coverage could allow NC State's guards, DJ Horn and Casey Morsell, to have a lot of success in the mid-range, and the Wolfpack rely on that mid-range shooting and efficiency a lot more than Alabama does, just when you think about what they're going up against schematically. So I would rather attack one of NC State's guards if I'm looking at a points prop over and I want to have a fun bet maybe on the Cinderella team left in the big dance, rather than trying to go about it by betting on the big man, literally,
Got it.
DJ Burns here.
Dude, you are locked in. I mean, if anybody wants to bet on the Final Four, this 22 minutes with Eli Hershkovich will be on Apple Podcast and or Spotify. Search Out of Bounds with Bo Bounds. And he's telling you where to go and kind of how he sees it. And he has left no stone unturned. So if you go to the Golden Moon Casino Sportsbook and Lounge this weekend, have a big time, beverages, and the games with the guys, you'll want to listen to this interview between now and Saturday afternoon. All right, man. That was good. That was good. So I appreciate it. Eli Hershkovich, college basketball insider, The Lines US. What's the name of your podcast, Eli?
So you could search The Lines, one word, The Lines, on Apple, Spotify, wherever you find your favorite podcast. I'll be doing a big Final Four betting pod later tonight with a couple of big-time college hoops analytics guys as well. Eric Haslam, who runs HaslamMetrics.com. I don't know if any of you, Bo, or any of your listeners are digging to KenPom or any of those college basketball analytics sites, but HaslamMetrics is one of the best out there as well. So should be a lot of fun doing the podcast. The Lines, one word, is where you could find Outside Shots, my college basketball betting podcast.
Love it. Eli, enjoy it. We appreciate the time. We'll catch up again soon, okay?
All right. Have a good rest of the show, Bo.
Eli Hershkovich out of Chicago, Illinois, college basketball insider. You can type in The Lines, one word, also at The Lines US. You can follow him on Twitter at Eli Hershkovich, and we'll tag him here in a minute. That interview where he just laid out his thoughts on the Final Four and UConn and Bama and Purdue and NC State, that will be on Apple Podcast or Spotify. Search Out of Bounds with Bo Bounds. Hey, the show is driven by any of your Napa Auto Parts stores in the metro area. They're locally owned by Reggie Sims. They got a great team. We were there last week. They have the Gear Wrench tools, the Milwaukee tools. If you're a technician or a mechanic, you want to make any of the Napa Auto Parts stores your go-to, including one of the new ones on Gallatin Street, Napa Auto Parts store. One of the new stores, I-55 North, DeVille Plaza in Jackson. Where did I broadcast last week? I was at the Napa Auto Parts store on Highway 49 South in Richland, Mississippi. Napa Auto Parts stores, technicians, mechanics, anything on a construction site. Napa Auto Parts stores, locally owned by Reggie Sims and the team. And again, Gallatin Street is one of their new locations. I tell you what I'm looking forward to tomorrow. I'm going to Spring Street Cigars in Starkville, and I haven't been there in a month. And it is past time. One of the coolest cigar shops and lounges in the Southeast. Spring Street Cigars in Starkville. Have a great day. We'll see you tomorrow.